Hi everybody, Chris here. Welcome back to 30-Day Excel Analyst. This is Excel Modeling Week. If you're watching live, we've got a modeling exercise, a row-to-row modeling exercise we're going to do today for 10 or 15 minutes. Leave me some comments in the chat. I'll deal with those at the end. If you're watching on replay, a big welcome to you too. I hope you're getting value out of the 30-Day Excel Analyst course. Leave me a comment below. I will get back to you in the comments there. But this is 30-Day Excel Analysts. It's day 14, so we're coming up to the halfway point, and we're looking to transform your analytical skill set in about 30 days. And this is Excel Modeling Week. So to give you the overview, we always start with the overview. We start with the whole. There's 4 key skills for the Excel Analyst: data management, data analysis, we covered last week, Excel modeling, which is this week, and Excel automation, which is going to be the week after next, because we're going to have a rest week next week. Now, I won't go through this slide in detail, but what's an Excel model? Many Excel files are not Excel models. There's specific things that a model has to have: input, process, and output, and a calculation chain, and it has to create some useful insight for professionals out there. So today we're going to look at building a calculation chain, putting together one of these calculation chains, a non-trivial calculation chain based on a row-by-row modeling example that's closely based on what I'm doing every day in the real world. And this, again, is an overview slide. So the big 5 formulae we looked at yesterday. If you haven't looked at yesterday's session, make sure you download it. I share an Excel download file, an Excel skills file that takes you through the basics of Excel modeling, including all of these formulae, covering formula building skills as well. And today, we're moving on. Input, process, output is our key concept here, but we're going to focus more on planning and conceptualization. This is one of our Excel Meta skills. So we're not just going to jump into Excel to do this task. We're going to try to plan it a bit. Work through that planning and conceptualization. Structure determines programmer behavior. We'll talk about that in a bit. If the planning phase is right, your experience of putting the model together will be much, much less stressful. So Excel modeling, it's a vast topic, but there's an infinite range of Excel models. There's an infinite range of applications, but there are some common types. And yesterday we talked about and built, to some extent, just built parts of it, our own budget planner, personal financial planner, very common application of modeling in Excel. So there your inputs would be your expenditure for the month, your sources of income for the month, and they would be calculated. That would be your process, giving you a subtotal for each month, for example, and it would work towards an ultimate output of a total for the year. Perhaps that's what you're most interested in. So we've got input, process, output, a calculation chain, and some useful insight. So there's lots of variations of that. For business planning, whatever it might be, you'll see lots of models to do with financial planning in Excel. Another model type is a row-to-row model, what I call a row-to-row model. Now, we do lots of this kind of work in trading, particularly in football trading. My company is very active in that area. But I kind of cut my teeth with row-to-row modeling in Forex trading. Now, what's a row-to-row model? Each row contains a piece of information, and it's usually a trade or taking a bet in the football trading context. And then we want to do some calculations. And those calculations, they have to work on a row-to-row basis. One row has to talk to the row below, because we're trying to build up that calculation chain and get an overall picture. It could be a cumulative total. Today, we're going to work on this idea of expected odds. But what's our general approach? And try to apply this as best you can. We know the Excel Meta Skill of planning and conceptualization. And I love this phrase from management science. Structure determines behavior. I say spreadsheet structure determines programmer behavior. That's because if the structure of your spreadsheet is right, your behavior is going to be very different. You're going to be more relaxed. You're going to be more productive. You're going to be able to create more value for the person that you're working for if the structure of the spreadsheet is helpful. Now, this is a kind of truism from management science. The structure determines behavior. And I said in the video description below, organizational structure, so an organizational hierarchy, that determines the experience of the employees in the organization. For example, if you've got a tricky task, The organizational hierarchy determines if you can quickly get resources, call on your colleagues, other people to help you with that task, for example. So the organizational structure really determines the experience of the employees. And there's many other examples of this. That's not a particularly good example, but I've seen this time and again. I've had many times where I've had to work within a suboptimal spreadsheet structure because the structure has been fixed for some reason. Maybe the data isn't particularly well organized. That's a much more stressful experience than being able to set it up yourself, get the right files, get the right sheets in each file, get the right layout for each sheet. If you can do that, that's all part of planning and conceptualization. Your experience, your behavior is going to be very different. You can have a much more relaxed and productive experience building your Excel model as an Excel analyst. So the specific situation we're looking at today, as always, download file, you can access, there's a link in the video description below. There's an Excel file with data in. So modeling for the DFL being, of course, fans of the channel know it's the Doggy Football League. And in the file, we've got row by row data. So we've got data for each fictional bet that's been taken out, and we want to calculate, how profitable is this strategy? A very typical thing you'd want to do in trading or with a row by row file. So your customer wishes to explore specifically what's called the concept of expected odds with row by row data comprising bets taken on the Doggy Football League. That's all in the download file. We'll deal with this idea of expected odds, but I had to do this a few months ago for a customer. It's a very common thing to want to do. Each row represents a bet and includes the bet result. Expected odds are derived from results to date for the system. This is the concept of expected odds. So we look at all the bets to date. We want to count those up and then calculate the number of winners. The number of winners divided by the total bets, that gives us a probability. This is what we're looking for in terms of expected odds. And this chart, which you can get to eventually if you work all the way through the task, that's the actual odds. And then what we'll see is reversion to the mean here. We'll see those expected odds over time getting closer and closer to those actual odds. How that process happens, well, that's going to create lots of opportunities for a trader. And this is the idea of expected odds. I'm not going to go too deep into that. Expected odds are derived from results to date. How close are the expected odds to the actual odds? Your customer will look for value in this way. So can you calculate expected odds by creating a row by row model in Excel? So are we going to jump straight into the spreadsheet? Well, that's not the best way to do it. The spreadsheet comes later. Planning and conceptualization, the concept comes first. So let's talk about how you might want to work through it later in the program in the tools of the trade week, when I guarantee nobody's going to be watching, but these are so important. These tools of the trade week will go through the tools you can actually use. I actually use, and I learned at university to do this planning and conceptualization. So, we've got the concept. Got to be very clear. What is the calculation we're trying to do here? Excel can't work out what the calculation is you're trying to do. It can only translate the calculation that's clear in your head. So expected odds, this is what I just explained. It's the idea of wins to date divided by total games to date. And remember, each game is expressed in a row in the data file. And then all of that is divided, one is divided by all of that. And that just has the effect of changing a probability, a percentage, into a decimal. So the basic calculation has got to be clear. If you're not clear about the basic calculation, Excel can't work it out for you. You're very likely to get into a tangle in Excel. So the concept is clear, what I'm trying to do. Now I'm going to break it down. I'm going to break down that concepts into smaller calculations, intermediary steps that might help me get to that calculation. And clearly, I'm benefiting massively from having written down that calculation. For me, you've got to get active here. I take loads of notes. I was doing loads of notes yesterday. These are notes I did yesterday about a customer project. Get active, get writing. This kind of thing all helps. It helps you think, can I break this down? Can I break this down into parts that I can understand? Can I take those intermediary steps? So for example, if we're dealing with this expected odds calculation, well, we've got to count the wins to date. That's something we've got to do. And notice we're using active language here. We're looking to count those wins, and there's a count formula in Excel. So we're getting into that translation mode. We need to calculate the percentage of winners, but before doing that, we also need to count the games to date as well. So we're breaking down our calculation into these intermediary steps. So it's our conceptual thinking here. Now, can we translate that into a column layout, into the layout that's going to make the calculations easy? This is how I suggest you work through it. So I've got my concepts here, and it's fairly straightforward. They calculate, not perfectly. They translate rather not perfectly, but fairly well into column headers. Yes, this is what I suggest you do. Don't try to do one long formula in one column. Break out those calculations across multiple columns. This is the way to do modeling in Excel. Multiple columns, short formulae, calculation chains that are easy to understand. This is going to mean understanding and debugging is easier for you as the analyst. It also means that Excel will calculate more efficiently in the background. So Excel is going to be happier too. So with that in mind, we've done our planning and conceptualization. Only after that can we get into the Excel file. I'm 11 minutes in now. And that's a good representation, of how long I'll spend doing planning and conceptualization. I might spend half the time on the task doing the planning and conceptualization and only half the time on the task actually in Excel. So this is where we're going to get to. I'm going to go ahead and copy this sheet. So right-clicking on the Sheet tab, going to create a copy here. So you can come back to that first sheet for reference. And you can see on the first sheet, we've got all of our calculations in. And you could go ahead. Yes, we do have a chart here. I thought the chart had gone missing, but we've got the chart here from the slides. And yeah, we did Excel charts in Data Analysis Week. You can go back and get some tips there. And just take a second to note, the layout is helpful, isn't it? Firstly, the layout of the data is pretty helpful. And this is data that I generated myself randomly. So yeah, it's going to be fairly clean. You can go back to Data Management Week for all kinds of data management tips and tricks. And then you can see the formatting is different. Yeah, I've just gone for the reverse formatting trick here. So here we've got orange on the background, the text in white. Here we've got white on the background, the text in orange. And this just shows that, well, these formulae, they're doing something different. They're doing calculations and they contain, these columns rather, they contain formulae. They're doing something different. So the formatting of the spreadsheet is gently conveying what the role of each cell is, and those concepts of input, process, output are helping us there. So I'm going to go to the second data sheet here, and we're just going to go ahead and delete the formulae, and then can we put it together? Should be reasonably straightforward, famous last words, because structure determines behavior, and the structural layout of this spreadsheet is helpful. So win so far. What kind of data are we working with? Well, we want to count these results here. So we're working with discrete data, and that means we're going to try COUNTIF. Let's just go ahead. I'm going to select the whole range here just to remind ourselves how COUNTIF works, but this isn't exactly what we're going to want to do. But COUNTIF requires a range and a criteria. I'm just going to type in W here because that W represents a win in the win column there. So that's just a basic demonstration of what we're trying to do with COUNTIF. But of course, this is a row by row model. So we don't want to count what's going on in the future here. We only want to count what's happened to date. So what's happened so far. So how to do that? This is a little bit tricky, but it's a good demonstration here of these different references. So we spoke about the dollar signs yesterday, relative reference, absolute reference. What do we want to happen here? Well, when we drag this formula down, we want to count the results up to the row that we get to. So the top point of that range that we want to count, that's going to be fixed. That's going to be fixed on H5. And then the bottom point of that range, well, we want that to move down with the formula here. So something like this, you can see we've got different types of references combined together. So we've got a full absolute reference here combined with a partial absolute reference. Then we're going to go down here. So I'm just going to double click. And what we can see as we go down, look at this beautiful stuff, just hitting the F2 key here, a beautiful visualization of those references in action. So because we've got the dollar signs here around H5, that's always going to be fixed. And then the second half of that countif reference, that's going to move down with the formula. So always take the time to do a little bit of manual checking here. So we always do one thing at least two ways to validate our work. And I can see there's 3 wins there. I could even go down here and I can see there's 4 wins so far. So that formula appears to be accurate there. Okay. So a similar thing here with losses so far. How would you deal with this actually? Before we do that, we're just going to improve this a little bit because this formula, what would you call this? We've got a W in the formula there. Should be okay in this context. But what if we get some data in? This kind of thing happens all the time, particularly in football data. Football team names are always changing, or how the companies represent those team names is always changing. Manchester United becomes Man United, becomes Man U. Huh. But we're making ourselves, vulnerable to this because we've hard-coded the criteria into the formula there. Yeah, we've actually put the text in. So what might work better? Well, you can see I've put W and L at the top here. So rather than hard coding that, which would make it difficult to change, should the way they're representing the win change, which might happen, we could use a cell. Now I'm going to use this cell here. This cell could be on a supporting sheet, could be on an engine sheet, because the file overall structure, we should have different sheets doing different things. We've got a dedicated sheet session about that later in 30-day Excel Analyst. But this means now you can see I've used a full absolute reference there because we want that reference to stay when the formula is copied down here. Going to hit the F2 key here, not the F4 key. Hit the F2 key, and I can see when I work down there, that formula reference is changing. So that means, should that win notation change? Maybe they're going to use a 1 to represent a win. Maybe they're going to spell it out, W-I-N. This kind of thing happens all the time as a data analyst. It means I could just change the value in this cell and we'd be able to cope with those changes. So we're building a degree of flexibility into the spreadsheet here. So we've got wins so far. Hopefully we can consolidate our understanding now by repeating the same thing for the losses column. Excel is a skill. Practice, repetition. This is going to help us massively. So the range is the same. The range idea anyway is the same. So I'm going to say, type this in manually actually. So H5 to H5. The first H5 I want to be fixed. So just hitting the F4 key there. Then the criteria this time, well, once again, you could type in the letter L, but it's going to be more flexible, give your spreadsheet more sustainability. You can see I'm getting into a formula building tangle here. It's going to be more flexible, generally better. Always a bit hesitant about using the word better, but in this case, I think we could argue that. So you can see the first formula, well, there's a win in the first cell. That's returning a value of 0. And then you can see as we go down, I just love that visual. That's such a good representation of a partial, what would you say? Yeah, a relative reference combining with an absolute reference there. Okay, nice. So what else do we need? Well, we've completed our first challenge. So now I'm thinking, what do we need next? What do we need next? So I just felt then, and try to feel this yourself, I just felt the cognitive load just spiked, just went right up there. Just like when you're doing your exercise, you're wearing your watch or something, you can monitor your heart rate. You can feel your heart rate go up. This is what I'm trying to do when I'm running. I'm trying to feel my heart rate going up. I just felt then, wow, cognitive load just went right up. That's because I'm thinking, how am I going to calculate wins or losses? So I'm kind of monitoring my levels of stress as I go through the exercise. But what I should have done is go back to our plan, go back to our planning and conceptualization. So what's next? Well, wins plus losses, how to calculate that. I can think about this now conceptually in conceptual universe, away from the stress of the Excel interface here. So wins plus losses, fairly straightforward, should be just this column plus this column, the number of wins so far plus the number of losses so far. That will give me the total games to date. And then I should be in a position to start putting together this calculation. So back into the spreadsheet. So what kind of formula are we going to use? Well, it's a simple arithmetic formula here. You might say, Chris, are you seriously teach me how to do this? This is really, really simple. Guys, A properly constructed Excel model, doesn't matter how complex the situation you're dealing with, a properly constructed Excel model is simple. The formulae are simple. There's lots of formulae, there's lots of columns, but the formulae themselves are simple. Good. So we're now in a position to calculate those expected odds. Again, I just felt a spike in cognitive load when I was trying to work that out. So I'm just going to go back to conceptual land. That's fine by me. And we're thinking now about how to calculate those expected odds. So we've got expected odds decimal first. So we're concerned with this portion of the calculation, not concerned with the 1/over portion. That's going to come in the next calculation. So we're working through it step by step, keeping the stress levels down. So it's going to be the number of wins divided by the total games. Once again, super simple arithmetic formula. Then we can go down here. And what we'd expect to happen, because the odds, as I set this simulation up, the odds were 50-50 for a win or loss. What we'd expect over time is that kind of reversion to the mean. So we would expect this figure eventually to settle. I think we've got 800 rows here, so I'm just going to go control and down arrow down to the bottom. We'd expect this eventually to oscillate above and below the 0.5 figure, but it will settle eventually. It's done that very nicely for me in this demonstration. That wasn't intentional. It will eventually settle on 0.5. So once again, a validation of what we're doing. So we've got our decimal odds there. And the chart is here ready for some inputs as well. Now we can do our expected odds. So what's that? I'm going to flip back to conceptual land. And now it's 1/over wins to date divided by total games to date. This is all done. So it should be a fairly simple calculation here. So I can say 1/over this cell, of course, it's going to look a bit strange on the first row, but on the first row, we've had one game, we've had one win. So it's a 100% likelihood there. So I can just take this down here. And on the second row, doing our validation now, on the second row, we've had two games with one win. So that's a kind of 2-to-1 situation. And then we can go down and eventually we're going to, once again, settle around 2 because it's a 50-50 situation. They were the original probabilities as I set them up. And then we get this super cool output. So how about this, guys? This is combining Excel modeling with some of our data analysis skills, in this case, chart building. And I went a bit mental on this chart, didn't I? I'm not sure about these colors, the purple to green there, but it gives you a sense of the sophistication that you can get to in terms of formatting Excel charts. But I just love this beautiful line. And you might look at that chart and think, there's no way I could put that together. But you can see how simple, straightforward that process was. Short formulae, just those little arithmetic formulae. We've got the number of columns you need. All of that came from proper conceptualization of what's going on here, which we worked through today. Right. So that pretty much concludes the session, guys. But I'll go through the chat now. And as I said, if you're watching these sessions on replay, thanks so much for being with us. I'm very happy to deal with your comments in the comments below. So leave me a comment there and I will get back to you. So just a quick note for the guys watching live. So really appreciate you guys tuning in live. Dave, how are you doing? Good to hear about your job interview stuff, Dave. You've got the heat wave up in Bradford. It's been raining all morning and most of the night here in the Midlands. Welcome, Bert. How you doing? Michael tuning in. How's it going? Kieran. Jerry tuning in. I don't think I've seen you live, Jerry. So thanks so much for joining us. Whereabouts are you in the world? Roger tuning in. How you doing, Roger? Arnie tuning in as well. Better late than never. Thanks so much for joining us, Arnie. Fantastic stuff. And Maz says, having some product with those double before brackets. What would be a simple explanation of this? Some product. Yes. Maz, I don't know that much about some products, but I do know where you're trying to get that row to row functionality that we've been talking about today, and hopefully that's come through clearly in today's explanations. where you've got some kind of row to row function. I have seen people use that sum product formula. The reason I don't use it is this is a lot better. Yeah. But in trading circles, Excel formulae get bandied around in WhatsApp groups and stuff. I have seen some people use some product for that purpose. I recommend rather than some product, you work through it step by step. What we're doing today, and Nate's absolutely right. When does the doggy football season start? When's the next season? Good question, Nato. I don't know. Have to ask Luna. Luna's down here. She's fast asleep. She's actually, when dogs lie on their back, they've got their legs in the air when they're really chilled out. So maybe these streaming chills are out. I'm not absolutely sure. Once again, guys, thanks so much for watching. And for the live crew who've been joining me, I really appreciate it, guys. Just to let you know, I have a pain in the back of my mouth. The last time I got this pain, I had a wisdom tooth coming through. Yeah. So this has been happening the past couple of days. I'm going to see the dentist this afternoon. If I have to have a wisdom tooth out, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to live stream. Last time I did that, I couldn't speak for a couple of days. So we're going to have to see what's happening. So it may be that we have, maybe we'll bring that rest week forward a few days, but just a heads up. The best way to work out if we're going live or not will be to go to the YouTube channel. I'll put a post on the community function. So it will just be a post explaining what's going on. But I don't know, I might be fine, but just a bit of a heads up for tomorrow. Very good, guys. Okay, thanks so much for joining us. 30-day Excel Analyst. Hopefully we'll be back tomorrow with more from Excel Modeling Week. Take care. I'll see you then.